Hello and welcome back once again to Indiepocalypse Radio, the source for all things Indiepocalypse related and Indiepocalypse adjacent. And the last stream before the exciting pledge drive next Saturday because I don't have vacation time, so I have to do it on a Saturday. So I have to. I'll be here for 8 hours next Saturday, 9 to 5. But this Saturday, we're not here for 8 hours, and it is neither 9 nor 5. We won't see either of those times. Maybe, probably not. 3 hour show would be very long. I don't plan on running a 3 hour show. But I'm Andrew. I am your host. Indiepocalypse is, of course, the monthly anthology of games and all that. We are here with a couple of guests from the latest issue of Indiepocalypse, enjoying its last moment in the sun as the bright young baby of Indiepocalypse before the new one comes out in but 6 meager days. Joining me first from that aforementioned issue 39 with Universal Studios Theme Park Parks Adventure, Izzy Kessler. Izzy, hello, how are you today?
Hey, hello. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm all fired up. An important question the people have dying to know. Got to get out of the way. How did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
Oh, geez. I've been familiar for a while, just word of mouth, I guess, on
Right.
Twitter. Probably friends, works being included. Um, yeah, I don't know if I could pin down. Probably just Twitter. I just generally have seen it come up.
Yes, friends' work being involved seems to be almost an unavoidable inevitability at this point.
Yeah.
There's like once you start hitting 400 people, that's a lot of. You've kind of touched every corner of indie dev, and except
Yeah.
when you realize you still haven't yet. It's what makes me realize that there are no actual, there is no indie scene or no cohesive indie scene because there's just 80 million people making games,
Yep.
and it's
Yeah,
like
it's wild out there.
some of them know each other, but so many of them don't, and it's mostly some of them are very online, which gives the illusion of a cohesive indie space. But speaking of indie games, I keep saying the word. Tell me a little bit about Tell me about Universal Studios Theme Parks Adventure. Did I double that
Yeah,
up, or is that the title? Is that
Universal Studio theme parks. The plural, I always get the parks messed up.
yes?
Adventure. Yes, there
Okay,
are two
yes, that's what I
adventures.
thought. But it was one of those things where I saw it like a million times, and then I was like, now I have to say it. Did I type it wrong?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. Yeah, so I created that game for Review Jam, which was like a couple of months ago. And the premise for the jam, if I'm kind of paraphrasing, I don't have it open for me
Right.
up front, but like it was something about kind of just doing a work that is reviewing an old game or some kind of work like a movie or something that you've seen or watched. And the tack that I decided to take with it was like I feel like everyone has this maybe a couple of these games that they
Yeah.
played when they were like, in their early teens. Your mom comes home for Christmas and like, oh, sorry, they didn't have anything. They're sold out of Mario Sunshine or whatever,
Yes.
and like here's whatever Razor freestyle scooter I got from the bargain bin at Kohl's.
Yeah. I
Um,
I think I grew up playing Bubsy a lot more than Super Mario World.
oh no. Yeah, yeah. You get into situations like that, and it's kind of like, you are a child, you don't have money to go spend on your own entertainment. You kind of are locked into whatever your parents come home with, whatever they can dig up for you. And they typically don't really have any sense of like what is good or interesting or
Yeah.
what you actually want to play. Um, so Universal Studios Theme Parks was a 2001 GameCube game, I believe.
Yes.
um, I actually didn't like get it new in any like from a store or whatever from for a present, but I think a friend of a friend left it at my house, like just a loose disc. He was just like, I don't like this game. I don't want it anymore. you have a GameCube, you can have it. And I'm like, all right. And then it just became a thing that my friends and I would go back to from time to time and just kind of wander through it. And the most uh, enduring memory, I think, is the trivia sections
Yeah.
where they ask you a bunch of questions about, some of the movies that are represented in the game, which is like Jaws, E.T., all the big ones you kind of like would think about when you think about Universal. And then also a lot of stuff that I have just never even heard of before. Especially when I was like 12 or whatever. Like, I don't know what these movies are,
Right. Yeah.
and I don't know what Waterworld is.
Yeah, like I say, probably
And
12-year-olds are very excited about Waterworld.
yeah, it's a very strange vibe because it's like the game is very like you play the main avatar is like a child and it's very like, hey, you're just like a kid at the having a fun day at the theme park and you talk
Yeah.
to Woody Woodpecker and um it's obviously made for children,
Yes.
right? But then you get to do the trivia and it's like, okay, here's a bunch of movies that came out in like the 80s or early 90s. Um Try to remember these specific facts about them, and I'm
Right.
like, I don't have a fucking clue. I'm just gonna keep guessing answers until I get something right.
That and
Um,
that is like now I'm thinking like because I'm like, oh right, actually, like my only knowledge of Universal Studios as a theme park is the Waterworld stunt show. So, but still, like how much how much of that transfers into like anyone knowing a thing about that movie?
exactly. That's the thing that's so fascinating about it too is like as a child I am playing this facsimile of the Universal theme parks experience,
Yeah.
which the theme park rides are based on movie properties. And then this game is based on the theme park, which is based on the properties. And now with my game, Universal Studio Theme Parks Adventures Adventure, I am now kind of creating this facsimile of playing this game that is the loop goes on and on and on.
Yes.
I just
Right.
keep like kind of layering on the meta stuff until like it's basically unrecognizable. Like that game, my game does have an ET, quote unquote ride, a Waterworld section, backdraft, all that stuff. But it's just kind of like my memory. Also, obviously,
Yeah.
looking stuff up on YouTube and making
Now,
making it familiar enough.
now,
But
Backdraft, I'm fairly sure you made up. I don't think that's a movie.
it is a real it. Okay, well, I will say this: it's the only one that I have not seen. I actually, since I made this game,
Yeah.
I went on a trip and I watched Waterworld on the plane.
Ooh.
So I gained the knowledge of Waterworld. Took a lot of self-control not to go back and update the Waterworld level because I wanted to include a bunch of puns and jokes from it.
Yeah.
Um, I did not, but I have still not seen Backdraft, but I do think it's like saved in the to watch list of my Roku, so it is a real movie.
Yeah, it is. This just feels like a very specific type of movie because, like, I know all these faces of old men. I know like all these old who all these
Yeah.
old men are, but it's like disappeared. Like nobody thinks about Backdraft anymore.
Nope.
But they made a Backdraft 2 in 2019.
Oh my god.
Yes,
Oh
the
my god. I need to watch that.
Donald Sutherland and William Baldwin are back.
What in the hell? How do you do a sequel? Like I can't. How do you not just reboot it?
Right.
That is so wild to me. Oh no, you've opened a whole
You have to
rabbit hole for me to dive down now.
because you have to continue the story, of course.
Oh god,
Like
yeah.
like that's just like life on the internet. You even saying Jaws again is I have a dark voice in the back of my mind that's telling me to buy an anchor jacket so I can have like the blazer from that the mayor of Amity has.
Yeah, I also watched Flipper on a flight recently, and I realized that is also a Universal movie. So I developed this whole like head canon about like, oh, what if Jaws and Flipper? What if there was like, you have like Freddy versus Jason
Right.
movies. Like, what if it was Jaws versus Flipper because they're all in the same cinematic universe, and
Yes.
like
Yeah.
the gears just keep turning, and I'm like, oh god, I can't make a whole Universal Studios theme parks adventure cinematic universe
And
or
like it blends into
gamified
Waterworld so
universe.
sensibly.
The Luddick universe, yeah. Oh, Jesus, it's a lot.
Jaws 3 proved that Jaws is capable of harboring feelings of revenge.
There is
So
not a Jaws 3.
there is. There might even be a
Jeez.
Jaws 4. I don't remember.
Oh, Jaws 3D. That's
Yes.
oh okay.
Oh no, Jaws. Sorry, I was mistaken. Jaws 4 is the one where Jaws takes their revenge. It's called,
That
given that it's called Jaws the Revenge.
There
but
are so many things. A screenshot that I love, or like a
yeah,
thing that I say a lot, in Katamari Damacy, there's the king sometimes, like after you finish getting a star rolled up, he's like, the world really is full of things, and
yes,
I'm like, I'm always thinking about that all the time.
yeah. I my a similar brain worm in that same like vein is like there's a line from Atlanta where someone says that you made that up, and he's like, everything's made up. We made everything up.
Yes,
I'm like,
exactly.
yeah, right. We invented this whole weird. Now, I have a very important question for you about this game.
Yeah.
Um, did you modify the Woody Woodpecker voice in any way, or is that all
No.
natural?
That's 100%. So the music and every voice line of Woody Woodpecker
Yeah.
is 100% ripped from the game. I found a YouTube channel that had
Okay.
rips for everything. Unbelievably, I couldn't believe that someone just had every single voice line that Winnie and Woody say in that game. And there are times where it's like chopped up in a way where I like just thought it was funny to like pace out the conversation, so he's saying
Right.
stuff like that. But no, there's no splicing of anything together. There's no it just he just sounds like that.
It's truly like I got more really fascinated by this game a little because I kind of I like trash art a lot.
Yes.
And I was like dipping in, especially after like I won't spoil the climax of the game, the game of the game that is, but
Yes.
it fills you with a sense of wonder for this GameCube game. And then when it started, and I was watching like a long play, and there was like I heard him, and I was like, well, this has got to be where she ripped the audio from because
Yes.
this couldn't be how horrible this character actually sounds. This must be a bad. You must have just YouTubed the first one you could find, and but no,
Nope.
he sounds
That's just him. That's just
truly
Woody
cursed.
Woodpecker. He's super cursed. Did you get the Waterworld ending, or did you go watch the Waterworld segment on YouTube?
I it goes straight to the Waterworld segment, does it not?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. So if you get the Waterworld ending in my game, it zaps you to the YouTube video, like the long play.
yeah,
And the thing that I'm still to this day so fascinated by is that ride in the game. All the other rides, like Jurassic Park and Jaws, they are mini games. They're like meaningfully like you can say, oh, you get a score and there's a timer and there's verbs you can engage
yeah,
with it. Um, the Waterworld ride is a CGI cutscene that lasts about I want to say like 10 seconds,
you're right.
and you get to choose from four or five seats in like the audience to watch it at different angles. And it is the strangest, like you don't get anything for it. There's no reason to do it.
Yeah,
It's just like maybe at some point they thought about making a game for it and they ran out of time and they're like, well, we did do this cutscene, so I guess we'll put this in.
yeah. It makes me really think that like where I was looking up while we were talking, I was trying to look up who made this game and like where they were based on because it feels
Mhm.
like they were based in California and they just like it's one of those biases where they just know what the Waterworld stunt show is.
Yeah.
And they're just like, yeah, the Waterworld stunt show. People are going to be excited that we made this weird facsimile of it. Um, now, important question. What is your relationship to Woody Woodpecker in general?
Oh, I hate him.
Do you
Um,
because from my standpoint, he's the guy who's no longer David Lynch's life, and he's the guy on the front of my street that is offering free wood to people in
is that
front of.
real?
Yeah, someone on my street has a Woody Woodpecker like on a bin that says free
Oh my
wood,
God.
and also and
I
now
am
it recently added, "Don't steal my bin, you jerk."
okay. I am gonna need a screenshot or a screenshot, a
Yeah.
real RIRL screenshot, a photograph of that at some point because that is
Yes.
incredible.
Yes, I will
Um,
remember to make a stop and somehow make it not look weird.
yeah. Yes, yes. Woody Woodpecker is horrible. Obviously his voice doesn't help,
Yeah.
but I feel like when you're playing the actual game, the his vibe is just like he's always laughing and he's always like, "Hey, can I interest you in buying some crap?" And it's like always really expensive, and it just I don't know. I like he's supposed to be there to like help you have a good time, but then there's like, oh, the lines are really long, and he makes you like buy a pass to skip all the lines, and just everything about him just feels really antagonistic to me,
Yeah.
in this kind of passive aggressive way. So he's a little bit more overtly aggressive, I think, at times in my take on the game. But yeah, I don't care for him very much. I've
Okay.
decided.
Did you have any experience with him growing up as a child?
Aside from this game, not really.
Yeah.
I was aware of him, but I probably no. Otherwise, not really.
That's the same thing. That's why I was very surprised. I'm like, I guess that's the closest thing they have to a mascot.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing that's just like so fast. Everything about this game fascinates me, obviously. But just like there are, like you look at Marvel or something, you look
Right.
at like like other studios, and if you made like a Marvel, theme park game, Disney even, like there's like Disney theme park games,
Right.
and it's like, oh, you got Mickey, like there's a very clear
Mickey.
like anchor point,
Yeah.
and he's got like a backup crew and stuff, but like this game, you got Woody Woodpecker kind of leading the pack, and then you've got like Frankenstein walking around. Like that's one of the monsters you can like shake hands with. That's what you
Right.
do in the game, and then you get points. There's like a Wolfman. There's like the creature from the Black Lagoon. There's Chilly Willy, the little penguin, which I guess is a Woody Woodpecker
I believe
character.
so. I had heard the name Chili Willy before in my life before playing this game.
Yeah, but that's like kind of all they are. It's just like, okay, we have all these like classic cinema monsters
Yeah.
that don't like, I don't know, there's the version of this game where like they don't have the Woody Woodpecker IP, and then like do they put the Wolfman at the
Yes.
front gate? Like it just, oh, it's so
Dracula.
strange. They don't have a lot of choices, I guess.
Yeah, I mean they that proved when they attempted the Dark Universe. They
Yeah, exactly.
that was their
They do, I suppose they do have ET.
yeah.
ET is walking around the park, which is like, of all of these games, all of the rides, he's the only one that they really like have a very clear like, oh, here's a marketable face that we could put on. Everything else is like, oh, backdraft. I don't
Right.
know. There's firefighters. Like, yeah.
I went to Universal Studios Florida when I was younger, and I was sick, and I didn't go on the ET ride because I wanted to leave.
Oh no.
That's my. I think we did go on Jaws though. I don't know if I cannot remember if Backdraft was there. If I
Yeah. Well, hopefully it wasn't, because in the game, they basically the game backdraft, the ride, quote unquote, of
yeah.
backdraft is they lock you in a burning building and you have to save people. It seems super dangerous.
Yes, that seems like a thing that would be what do you call them nowadays? Kind of the what are the rides called where there were screens and you have fun little guns or whatever?
Oh yeah.
It seems like it would be
Yeah, I
one
don't
of those
know.
on rails things where you have fire hoses or something.
Yeah.
That's a whole like other weird version of like I don't are those do those physically move or are they just like on a screen that and your chair kind of shakes around? I'll admit
Probably your chair just shakes a little bit. Yeah.
I'll admit I haven't been to a theme park in you know
Oh
decades.
yeah, me neither.
I don't have a reason usually to go. Also, it takes a lot of money to get to Florida. you know, it takes
Yeah,
me
well, now you don't have to, because you can
yeah.
just experience the Universal Theme Park's adventure
Right.
experience.
I didn't even realize that now I have all these ideas of digital theme parks that I could. There's probably more. There's probably all sorts. I grew up playing a lot of not Sim Theme Park. I don't think it was Sim Theme Park, but it was like some kind of theme park tycoon game that wasn't Roller Coaster Tycoon. It's
Was it the
similar.
Bullfrog one?
Probably did it have like a weird little guy that talked to you a
Yeah,
lot?
it kind of looks like fucked up Willy Wonka.
No, no, it was not fucked up Willy Wonka. It was like
Okay.
in my mind, he's like this amorphous blob that is like I'm a mascot blob thing. Maybe it was Sim Theme Park. I remember it was the first time when I was a child that I learned, hey, computer games can sometimes run bad on your computer. And it was something.
Post a screenshot of that.
Theme Park World. Here we are.
Theme Park World. Was
And it
this also a bull? Yeah, okay. This was the So I played the original one of these, because this is
okay.
also the Bullfrog like IP.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
In North America, a Sim Theme Park. Yes. Okay. There we go. Yeah, this little guy, this little like Rayman dude with no arm, with hands but no arms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, There's people down here that receive BAFTAs for it. I guess good for them.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
I didn't. I've never received a BAFTA, but I don't think I'm in categories where they give you BAFTAs. And also, I think you have to be British probably, which
Probably.
difficult to like become that. You know. If you received a BAFTA, what would you want to receive a BAFTA in? You think?
Oh,
Or do you
you.
do you have an ideal reward, an ideal award you would like to receive?
I I don't know. I want the best Gex video game. That's my long-term goal is to make a new Gex
Did
and make
now?
it better than all the other ones.
Did you submit to that? Did you? Because wasn't Square Enix saying like, "Hey, pitch us on your games on our IP" at some point that we could get
Yes.
some items?
Yeah, that happened in 2015,
Yeah.
and I did have an idea at the time. I was not fully into the games making space at that point,
Right.
so I didn't have the confidence to actually follow through. Um, but yeah, that is a really interesting legacy that series that IP has now. Not even the series, the IP,
Yeah.
because I recently have been doing a lot of research because I'm a self-proclaimed number one fan of Gex,
Yes. Yes.
and I discovered that there was the Embracer acquisition recently,
Right.
where Square Enix sold Crystal Dynamics and a bunch of other properties to Embracer, and it is kind of implied, I think, that Embracer now owns Gex. But after talking to some people and kind of, I haven't confirmed this from Square Enix, but kind of what my understanding is that Square Enix still has the rights to Gex because, and this is
Yeah.
my assumption. I don't know this for sure. My assumption is that when they did that Square Enix Collective thing, because the Square Enix Collective is a separate entity
Right.
legally than Square Enix proper, um, Gex, Anachronox, and Fear Effect were all part of that 2015 pitching thing, and all of those IPs are still owned by the Square Enix Collective because they were a part of that thing and they were siloed off in that way,
Perfect.
so they were not transferred in that big sale.
That more hope to that I can get a Gex as my bonus DLC summon in Final Fantasy Remake 2
Yes,
when I buy a Reese's
yes.
bar.
Gex and Kingdom Hearts, like there's so much potential, I think, that they're
I
just wasting.
as someone who is uh getting mentally more into Kingdom Hearts lately, the idea of also like Gex was another one. Gex, Gex, Deep Cover Gecko as they call them, was a
Yes.
game I definitely played a lot more than Super Mario 64.
Perfect.
And
Yes.
and I have referenced on the show multiple times because I was also very fascinated by the fact that game came with demos on it.
Oh,
And
yeah, it did, didn't it?
you could play like a weird RTS or what are the Soul Reaver games.
Yeah.
And I think that's aspirational, honestly, that other indie developers should follow Gex's lead and put demos for other games on their games.
Yes.
But listen, we're gonna get really bogged down in Gex talk for a moment.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I had a whole hotel room day where I like, or when I was going on a trip. Sometimes I'll get like when I'm at post trip, I'll be like, oh, let's watch some video that's gonna go for a long time, so I can just like chill. And I
Hmm.
got very into Gextra life,
Oh,
because
yeah, yeah.
and just like that whole world. And I think too much more, like probably a like 10% of the amount of Gex you think about, but that still puts me probably in the top 2% percentile among the rest of the world.
Yeah, you're still up there, right? It's not a very competitive space. So
No, no, certainly, but it's a he's a weird little guy.
he is a
It's
very weird little guy.
it sticks out way more that anyway. This is not you have your own venue for talking obsessively about Gex.
Yeah, there's plenty of places where I could talk about Gax. I don't need to take up
Right.
the whole show with that, but
Yes.
yeah, it's always an open conversation.
Right. Nor do I. But it's just because I'm looking at the stream and he's just looking at me constantly. He's just side eyeing me over there. But anyway, but speaking of long-standing famous IPs, Is he? I gotta know. Mochi has to know. I kind of want to know of each guest. Do you have a favorite Toho character?
Oh. No, I have very little experience with that series. I'm familiar with the games. I know that they
Yes.
exist, but I could not name a Toho if you put a gun to my head.
And luckily, I will not be doing so. I will. I will. I will let you off the hook just simply not knowing about
Oh,
Toho. This is
thank God.
a space where Toho knowledge is not. This is Indiepocalypse is not a gate kept community where the
I'm happy to learn. If you wanna send me a DM and tell me what Toho game to play, I will check it out. But it just seems like a very deep well to fall in. And as we
yes,
have already established with the Universal Studios cinematic universe,
yeah.
I am very prone to falling in deep wells.
You're
So
right. Yeah, there is. You're right. There is a lot of deep. There's like 18 mainline plus like the whole fan game aspect to Toho. It's like
mm,
the world's deepest well. Like you can get into Toho without even playing Bullet Hell. It's honestly without even playing video games.
yeah,
But but with that, we are approaching our first break time. Izzy, thank you so much for being here and
thank you. Yeah,
being involved in all that. We're gonna go to a break. Uh, we'll be back with our next guest after like about a minute 49. Goodbye for now.
Okay.
Hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was Minutemen with number one hit song. Truly reminding myself that yes, the smartest radio purchase of 42 minute and a half songs. Nothing better for bumps and interstitials. Uh, but that all said, we are here with our second guest of the show, who you may also know from that aforementioned issue 39 of Indiepocalypse with Eyes. It's Umicus. Hello, Umicus. I said it right. Yes, I did. Nailed it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Nailed it in one.
Perfect.
Hi.
Hello. Of course I did. I got two. See, the thing is, sometimes people give me pronunciation guides, and that means I will never mispronounce it. But then it also means I get in my head about it.
Ah.
Yeah.
I mean, it also might have helped that I told you how my name's pronounced, just
Yes.
because I know that people will get it wrong.
Yeah, but no, that's all out of the way. We're not here for name talk. We're here for game talk. And speaking of
There you
game
go.
talk, as part of my informal marketing survey of how I get people involved, how did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
I am kind of pulling a blank on that. I'm not. I promise I'm not trying to do anything other than just. I think I might have seen it on Itch,
No.
on Itch's jam page,
Yeah.
saying Apocalypse paid compilation, whatever, and I was like, huh, that sounds interesting. I'm making a game right now. Might be worth checking out.
Yeah. Doesn't hurt to get paid. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, and it's also an interesting part of it too is I like the appeal of being part of a zine culture and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, for a long time, I've called myself more of a hobbyist game developer than an indie game developer,
Yeah.
just because like it's not my day job. It's not. I'm unsure if I ever want it to be my day job.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, I became a software developer because I wanted to make video games, and I've my participation in the game jam scene has been because you know that is part of why I became a software developer. So honoring the child's reasons for getting into this crazy industry.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of like I listen, if you're in the US and you do your taxes, the government asks you for your hobbyist expenses, your hobbyist income, uh hobby being hobbyist work is not it doesn't have to be your whole life. You can
That's
like
true.
you can and that's part of what I want to help promote. That's why this thing isn't like a whole multi-million-dollar investment. This is uh I'm not getting a lot of money, I'm not giving a lot of money. but it's like because it's there should be space where you don't have to be like all in mortgaging your house, taking out 80 million loans just to make a
True.
video
Well, I
game.
think, and the other thing too, I think with it is like when you say indie,
Yeah.
like you think of like Devolver Digital or Celeste
Oh, the
or
billion-dollar stock market companies or whatever.
yeah. Well, you think of these because like indie is almost for a lot of gamers is more of an aesthetic
Right.
or a level of a budget level almost than it is an actual anything beyond that. And like going back to the other segment talking about like different scenes, like it's actually interesting because like having been because one of the fun aspects because like my exposure to games development is mostly through game jams
Yeah.
because I have ADHD and it's the only way I get things released. um, but it's interesting to see the different scenes because like I was there because I don't know how many of your listeners like have experience with Ludum Dare or whatnot, but
Right.
I remember being there in I want to say 2016, 2017 ish
Yeah.
when things kind of went a little bit sideways with the website, and then a group of people decided to go off and start like a Laka Jam, and I participated in all of one of those, and then life got interesting and hard, and then I went. And then I didn't get back into doing game jams until like GMTK 2020. And yeah, anywho.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is like that's like game jam culture is its own like subculture within games. It's like there's I feel like there's probably just a bunch of people who just like almost exclusively do game jams, and there's in groups in game jams, and there's like cultures to game jams, and there's all sorts of like
Yeah. Well, like, yeah, for sure. And like in each game jam is also its own culture,
yeah,
especially the ones that happen more than like twice a year. Because like the ones that happen twice a year, you've got you've got somewhere between 110,000 people swarming a Discord server for a couple of weeks
yeah,
and then disappearing. That's whatever. But like to kind of go back around to the game that ended up in in issue 39, um, the Metroidvania month jam happens like 4 times a year, and it's a month long each time. Like it's a month long of making the game,
yeah,
and then like 2 weeks of voting for it. So like you actually get relatively sticky regulars.
right. Yeah, and it's
Uh,
like like little, and there's also an element of everybody kind of like wants to create their own little communities. Like
yeah, that's yeah, and some people are better at it than others.
yes, yes, and I'm I. It's a very weird thing because I don't think everybody needs to create their own community sometimes. And it's like
Yeah, well, because like part of what's going on to get a little bit social slash political is like online communities have become the other space for most people.
yeah,
Like you have home, you have work, and you have your 15 Discord servers that you hang out like three of them at any given time,
right,
and
right,
then
with your varying levels of notifications.
yeah, and then one day somebody pings everybody on accident, and then it turns into a beehive.
Yeah. That I've seen that happen. It's always the strangest thing because it's like I got a notification, I dismissed it and moved on with my life.
Yeah, no, it's fun to watch.
Yeah,
Watch happen
it's
sometimes.
like imagine like that kind of rancor if you just like got an email that you didn't want, a marketing email.
Well, I
And
mean, but at the same time, if somebody replied all,
yeah,
like, I think announcement channels are actually really good, have been a good thing for the purpose of like, oh, that's in the announcements channel on this, product focused Discord. I
yeah,
can probably like pop in, see what they're saying, and pop out, and not have to worry about it.
yeah, or you
That's
can
if
specifically mute that channel if you don't want to get those all notifications.
yeah, but yeah. Um,
But tell me a little bit.
so
So, speaking of game jams and games made for game jams, tell me a bit about Eyes.
So, Eyes is kind of, I guess I would describe it as like an autodidactic capstone project,
Okay.
which is a really weird way to say it.
Yeah.
But so in 2022, I ended up making something like about a dozen video games. Half of them were like 1 hour game jam things.
Right.
So they don't necessarily count for full score points or whatever, but like still a lot of things. And Eyes was the last game I did in 2022, and I built it over like the Thanksgiving Christmas holiday season, which I don't really recommend. And I honestly like game jams that are placed at that time, like at your own risk, I guess.
Yeah, right.
But what had happened was, and so like I talked about how Metroidvania month happens like 4 times a year, because it's like 1 month on, 1 month vote, 1 month off, 1 month on.
Yeah.
And so I had done a previous Metroidvania month called Scrap Hive, and the reason that Eyes is the way it is because Scrap Hive ended up making a lot of what felt like artistic missteps.
Yeah.
In a way, it's not a bad game per se. It's a little bit. Sometimes people can get lost in it a bit, but like there was this time where I was talking with the artist, and I'm like, "Hey, can you do this parallax effect?" And talking about going down rabbit holes.
Yeah.
So I'm building this game in Godot. I'm building it in the 2D engine, and they're like, "Hey, can you build this parallax effect?" And I ended up spending like a quarter of the game jam, like so a week and a half, diving down this rabbit hole of, okay, so can I like take these textures and project them back, and what's the math for that look like? And ended up building a 2.5D game in the like 2D game engine that wasn't really, it wasn't opposed to it, but it wasn't really built for it.
Right. But listen, that's the beauty of programming and making games is like being like, well, I do want to do this, but
Yeah, and so I ended up doing this whole thing with it, and then half the time I was working on this, my wife and I were like on a hotel out in the middle of in a small town in Colorado. It was anyway, but like, so the thing was, is I walked out of Scrap Hive going, okay, I made a really big misstep here because all of the effort I poured into that meant I couldn't build other things that I had wanted to try to build. So Eyes was kind of like, okay, let's see if I can make production decisions, to be specific, that enable me to actually build the kind of game that I was hoping to build the first time around before it kind of got sidetracked into a really weird art style. And so the thing with Eyes is like I ended up sitting down with the musician because I work with the same musician on both games. And I pointed him to some Metroid Prime tracks. I'm like, hey, last time it was like kind of Castlevania and really bombastic music. And, could we go for something a little bit more atmospheric this time? And then I sat down with the other developer, G. David, I think. I don't know quite how to pronounce his username. Anyway, and he ended up doing 80-90% of the art, but we sat down and we had a discussion up front of like, hey, so like, you helped me a little bit with this previous game. Here's an art style that I'm looking for, kind of a vibe, and can we go for it? And those two things, and then I started building, mechanics and level design as art got finished and stuff like that. And it came together in a really good way, but like part of why it came together is because I leaned into the strengths of the people I was working with.
Yeah.
And and it kind of got lucky. Because one of the fun things about doing game jams with strangers is sometimes you guys will mesh really well, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll get something impressive done, but it's still a hectic experience.
Yeah, right. Because you don't know, like, people work at a lot of different paces and speeds, and like I
Yeah. I
I work
mean,
super rapidly on everything that I do, and I it's usually why I work alone on everything because I feel like I can be probably overbearing.
yeah. See, like, I'm just the person that is good enough, not necessarily good, but good enough
Yeah,
at all of the aspects of like, game jam doing that if somebody ends up like not being able to put in as much as they thought they could, then I can probably pick up the pieces.
yeah, and I think that's the benefit to with like game jams, especially like trying you no matter what your background is, like try doing one solo because I think it's even if you
Yeah.
don't finish anything, even if you're deeply unsatisfied, uh, there's something nice to like understanding the workload that goes into everyone else's work and
Yep.
being like, oh no, just make 30 sprites, it's like that's just 30 pictures.
Yeah,
How hard is
no.
it? How long does it take to draw 30 pictures? And you're like, oh, it
Yeah.
takes a very long time.
I mean, I have had, like, speaking of, like, one of the things that happened to me in game jams consistently
Yeah,
until I started working with other people that had also had game jam experience was this consistently misbudgeting my art.
right, right.
Like, I have, there's a previous game called Wisp where 90% of the art budget, in terms of like time I spent on it, went into this cool 8 directional rotating floating helmet
Yeah,
that like is gives you like a 3D and 2D effect, and then the background just scribbles on a grid.
yeah, right.
Like, and it's yeah,
And that shows like there is that. I feel like that is a problem that comes up constantly with like even more modern like I don't know what it is, but there's this indescribable like background foreground stuff that just does not feel like it exists within the same space. Uh, and
I
that's
mean, I'm
something like
probably
tricky to navigate.
yeah, I'm probably like the worst person to notice something like that unless it's really obvious
Right.
because I have ADHD and variety is typically good. Although I suppose, I mean, yeah, I don't know. And I also don't play a lot of AAA games these days.
Right.
Not because I'm like, I don't, not because I like hate them or anything, but just because like the process of playing a AAA game also involves like forking out, you know, for either a modern game console or a gaming rig.
Yes.
And like, and I'm like, I'm a software developer. I don't need that much horsepower. I'm not doing the kinds of software development that need that.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of, value and joy out of, you know, building things. And so, like, I work in Godot. I deliberately, for the first while of my journey as a game developer, chose to work in 2D because I figured 3D and 3D math was going to probably be a bit more than I could handle at the time.
Right. Right. I think it comes
I'm,
from like a different like skill set.
yeah, I think I'm feeling out the space of trying to do 3D games a bit now. It's not something I've done a lot of work in yet, but I'm like thinking of ideas, and with Godot 4 coming out, I'm planning on giving that a try and all this stuff. I will say, speaking of not having powerful computers, if I could give a message to game jammers, you folks who use Unreal Engine 4 and 5 in
Yes.
game jams, please tune the defaults way down.
Yeah, I've run into that. I
Please.
have not my I have my little red light in my computer which tells you it's not a high end gaming. It was like not a high end gaming PC like 5 or 6 years ago when I bought it, but it is like gaming PC adjacent, and I've gotten some hand me down graphics cards from people. But still, like I played like some Unreal game like for this upcoming
Well,
issue, and it was like ran like it was garbage, and I had to crank
yeah, well, because
everything
it's
down, and it still ran terribly.
well, because like the thing is, like the like I don't know, like the 3 or 4 things that come to mind that you could like, if I was going to recommend settings that I've noticed in
Yeah,
like a professional Unreal games that I usually turn down: turning off motion blur, turning off depth of field, turning down like lighting settings and stuff like that. Because like I get it, Unreal games look pretty and that's kind of their whole thing.
Yeah.
But when you're building for a game jam specifically, you're building for people with potato PCs.
Right. And mostly speaking, like I think that if you're in game jams, especially, I think like maybe this is just my bias coming in, but like I understand that like when I load up an Unreal game, like oh yes, that's just like a lot of what Unreal looks like out of the box. So like it doesn't impress me because it looks nice because I'm like, well, use Unreal.
Well, yeah. I mean, because like, and I was, yeah. Well, because I was playing. I volunteered to be a judge on like the 7DRL
Yeah.
game development challenge. We'll call it. I don't know if it's exactly a game jam, as such. It's game jam adjacent though,
Right.
for sure. And there was an Unreal game in that one, and I played it, and it was like one of those things where like, obviously it looks kind of pretty because Unreal out of the box looks pretty, but how much of it was assets and how much of it was the developer. And it's like the thing is I don't mind people using assets to make games. It's something I do
Yeah.
whenever I'm kind of in off mode. Like if like I have kind of an ongoing who knows whenever I'll finish it thing of trying to use every sprite in the Kenny 1-bit sprite pack that's like 1,000 different.
Yeah, and plenty of people will like I see those and I recognize like yes, people use the assets, but it's never like movies.
It's never automatically a bad thing because the thing
movies
about
use assets, but it doesn't make it worse because the the set designer didn't build every chair on set.
right, but the thing is if you use assets or you build, a first person shooter or whatever, one, know your audience
Yeah.
when you're building like that. So like, tune things down if you can, if you have time. If not, maybe before your next game jam, like, I mean, the other thing that I would love is just if somebody randomly pointed me at, here's an Unreal config file, here's the potato Unreal config file, and here's where you usually drop it. That would be the other thing I would be happy to have.
Yeah. Just like I don't want to have to open Unreal and then like chug through menus so I can make this game semi-playable.
Well, I don't even like when I'm playing Unreal games.
Yeah.
Like I don't run Unreal on my laptop. I don't have it downloaded.
Yeah.
I don't know what to look for there.
Oh, right.
But yeah, but it's just. But anywho, but all that to say, so when you're building a game and you're using assets and stuff like that, you should then take that and use it as a way to be able to focus on other things more.
Right. It's like assets I think are a great thing for people to use, but it's about contextualizing them like within your own work,
Yeah.
Like,
or making them your own.
Yeah.
Like, and and sometimes you'll do better and sometimes you'll do worse. Like I consistently, it's funny, I make games with that Kenny asset pack.
Yeah.
And consistent the feedback I get is, oh, the sprites are cute.
Right.
And it's like, cool. I'm glad you guys like the look because I didn't put much effort into it.
Right. Of course they look good.
Of course it looks good. It's done by Asset Jesus. So
right. It's a weird little thing of like, well, I've made that so I don't have to think about like because it takes a lot of time to do a lot of different things and like, game development sometimes feels too obsessed with creating everything from scratch, and I have no interest in creating the universe each time I make a game.
Yeah. Well, and there's some value, like, and this is where I'll go into like philosophy of software development a tiny bit. I think there's value in diving one layer under whatever you're working on right now.
Yeah.
When the need, like, because eventually you'll end up doing it for debugging anyway. So like doing a little bit of preemptive reading of like, okay, so I'm working in Unity. What is the architecture underneath what I'm working like? Like what kinds of things can I get away with?
Yeah.
Oh, sometimes you just learn that through experience, like learning how Godot's 2D shadows in Godot 3 are kind of like a weird, how they're built really strangely overall.
Right, because there's a like because sometimes when you need to do something, when you need to figure out something, you need to like know what you're trying to figure out, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
or else you're
and
kind of
like
like trapped.
I've spent at least 10 hours across different game jams, like fiddling with shadows and trying to figure out why they're performing badly or poorly.
Yeah,
And like half the 3D effect in Scrap Hive. So one half of it was this little like, projecting these sprites on into the background by doing some 3D projection math on their vertices. The other half of it was using colored shadows everywhere.
yeah,
So you can only, because what I had done is I was going to build a 3 room by 3 room Metroidvania map because I was trying to control scope.
yeah. Right, right.
Um, uh, Spoiler warning: this did not work.
Yeah, yeah. No, no,
It,
because
it won't.
you're like, oh, I controlled level scope. Surely there would be no scope creep anywhere else within the game.
Yeah, well, it also didn't stay 3 room by 3 room. It
Right.
did. I will say, if you don't, if you go into a Metroidvania month challenge and you decide to make a game and you are just blanking on
Yeah.
how to build a map, starting from a 3 room by 3 room map is a good idea because it gives you like 9 directions to expand in.
Right, right. And then you can kind of
And it gives you
easily.
like this little interconnected core to it all.
Yeah, and that's if you really like break down a lot of those maps in these kind of Metroidvania sort of games, they have like hub zones or like a kind of thing like that where things tend to branch off from.
Yeah.
So you can easily traverse and backtrack. But speaking of Metroidvanias, search action games as a term that I actually like.
Oh yeah.
Well, hello there. But as a series that has had some Metroidvania, not official entries, but side projects, famous side projects, I have to know, Emicus, do you have a favorite Toho character?
Um, I can't really say that I do. And when I think of Toho characters, there is one specific one that comes to mind.
Yes.
I don't know her name.
What is
The only
she?
thing I know is that she's like from the fighting game, like one of the fighting game spin-offs,
Yeah.
and has like a red dress.
Oh, right.
And that's all I
The
know.
main one, the Shrine Maiden, probably.
Yeah, and like it's not like she's my favorite. It's like she is what I think of when I think of Toho.
Yes. Well, I believe she is. She is the. If Toho is a main character, I think she's it, or at least the
Yeah.
mascot. Her or
Now,
Marissa, one of the two.
my favorite Toho thing
Yes.
is very easily all of the Bad Apple videos of like running it on all kinds of crazy things.
Okay, that I don't know what that is. So that will be a thing.
Okay, so wow, you're gonna learn something cool today.
Yes.
So there's a song in one of the early Toho games called Bad Apple.
Yeah.
And it's somebody made a music video for it in black and white.
Right. Right.
And then because it's in black and white, that means that you can reasonably efficiently encode it into a couple kilobytes of memory.
Yes. Okay. I see where you're
Especially if you
going with
down
this.
sample it.
Yeah.
So hence Bad Apple running on everything from a Super NES to a like graphing calculator.
Okay. I will. I've got Windows open, and I will explore this at some point in the future.
And it is quite an entertaining hole to dive down, because just seeing what people have run it on, because like it's kind of like for video games the whole challenge of Doom running on something.
Right. Right. It's the like
So if you can't get Doom running on it, then getting Bad Apple running on it is the next thing to try.
Okay, well, perfect. Speaking of getting things running, we're gonna get running to our next break here in a moment. Eumarcus, thank you for being on the show with me here now. glad to have you here. Glad to have you involved. We're gonna go. I'm gonna take like a 2 and a 21-second break, and then I'll be back. Goodbye for now. Hello, welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was Weather Day with Sleep In While You're Doing Your Best. I've discovered the absurdity of genres recently, with a lot of stuff tagged Midwest emo when they are most certainly not in the Midwest of the United States, which is a good thing to remind you that genres do not mean anything. They are.
I mean, I feel like Midwest emo. Granted, I've not listened to any that I've known is that,
Yeah.
but like I hear that and that puts me in a state of mind.
Yes. It is a,
And
it is a genre that's come from the Midwest, though it is, since kind of become its own thing, and like a genre, and it's all. Wikipedia says it's all about the math rock, and that would make sense.
I mean, that math rock is what came to mind.
Yeah.
It's the Midwest. It's like the Midwest version of like weed rap.
Right. It's just like we have got nothing to do. We are in the middle of the United States. Let's make music.
I mean, making music is probably better than some things.
Yeah.
Although, but maybe they could make video games.
That's something I think about a lot, of the idea of like regional flavor in video games. And like,
I mean, so there's definitely a flavor at the international level.
Right.
At like the nation, because like you've got your Japanese kind of flavor of things, you've got your kind of European, like you have Slav jank, you have kind of the British. I mean, at one point there was the British scene of like stretching machines to do absurd amounts for the amount of hardware they had, which resulted in some really cool things actually.
There is. I can definitely. There's definitely an aesthetic to an Amiga game.
Yeah. What's interesting though is how that scene led to what is probably like the first commercially released 3D graphics card in Star Fox.
Right.
Because the I think it was Argonaut Games that built that, and they came out of like that Amiga Commodore 64 scene of like porting things to every possible computer, because there was 15 different types of computers at the time.
Yeah.
And then like the United States definitely has a flavor of video game that it does.
Right. Especially like yeah, I think you can, like, if you kind of step back for a second, I think you can find kind of especially design patterns in AAA that are very like U.S. centric.
Yeah.
If even like just simple things like those tiled menus, and
Like Destiny style.
oh, listen, that's a whole different kind of menu that I truly hate controller mouse cursor menus with the. It feels like you just.
Oh, I was trying to think of what you were talking about with
No,
menu.
like it's kind of like a streaming service, like where they have like these big block tiles of things, as opposed to.
Well, because every AAA game wants their menus to like impress you.
Right.
They're like sometimes people talk about how there are experiences that are spectacles of budget.
Right.
And a highly animated, the characters doing all kinds of little things or following your hands or whatever, or following the mouse cursor or whatever menu in some ways can be one of those spectacles of budget. And then you go into an indie game and like, okay. And then you go to an indie game and fancy is when they've customized the UI skin.
Right. No, I would love like those dynamic menus. This is a difficult thing to describe, I think, of this kind of like if you were to boot up a Roku, and you look at that and go, yes, there's grids of menu options. That is what I'm referring to.
Hmm.
But there are definitely like design trends of, but those are like, yes, those are like very broad, and I wonder how much of those are like monetarily or just like market driven rather than like your traditional local scene is built off like people within a region, playing off of one another and getting
I
inspired and inspiring one another.
I well, the thing I will say,
Yeah.
I mean, because yes, there definitely is some of that.
Yeah.
Because Texas has id Software and all of its descendants,
Yeah. Yeah.
vary and sundry, for example. And I would consider that to probably be a regional flavor of game in some ways, although big games are international things. But there's not that many places in the US that like have a game scene that's like self-sustaining as far as I'm aware. I mean, there's not that many big tech hubs in the US in general
Yeah.
in terms of like absolute numbers of places. You've got like, Silicon Valley, Seattle, the Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin areas, the New York, New Jersey scene, and then everything else. And I guess you do technically have Denver. Um, and then like everything else is not something that you discover until you've been there. Like Atlanta has a decent tech scene and
Right.
a lot of stuff like that, but people don't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is like, and I think part of it has to do with, there's you can't, there's no like gig equivalent for like independent, because I don't live like you don't need to truly like be in a tech hub to like make games, by yourself on a computer. You can kind
Mm-hmm.
of do that wherever, but there is
Yep. I
like
mean,
a difficulty then in like in forming a scene, because like how do you what do you go to, besides like you can have local meetups, but how do people sustain those sorts of meetups, and what causes them to start making those? Because I feel like a lot of those are also born out of big companies and people like,
yeah,
oh, work at big studios nearby. Let's all hang out.
yeah. Or like university hackathons.
Yeah, you're right, right. So you're still like
But
stuck
like,
in a probably a more urban area.
yeah, I mean, the thing with like university hackathons or like university game jams or stuff like that is like, again, the vast majority of schools, like having, like, so like I went to school at a place called Florida Gulf Coast University
Yeah,
um, in the Fort Myers area of Florida. Got my software engineering degree there. And they did have a video game design club, but only the person running it actually seems to be able to finish video games. And I, who was not a member, probably had finished more video games through the end of my college than most of the people that were there.
yeah, right.
Because it's a FGCU. It's not like it's a tiny school, but it's not like a super huge engineering school, and the kind of skills like in order to be able to build a video game while going to college and learning programming at the same time, like if that's where you're learning software development, you know, most people in their first stages of learning how to do software still don't know any ideas of what kind of scope they can realistically achieve on something.
Right, right. And there is if you don't have a baseline for something that can be small, if your experience with games is all, m- like main
It,
market video games, you're like, oh, games are 8 hours long. Games are
yeah,
4 hours long if they're really short. So you're kind of trapped in this kind of like mentality of like you need to build out all these systems and like everything. You can, if you're only building a game that's like 20 minutes long, you can have a bunch of one-off things that only used once, because you don't need to
mm-hmm.
you're not making a bunch of one-time use things over the course of a 40-hour experience. You're doing it over the course of a 20-hour experience. So most of the things are probably going to be one-use things. And then you
Well,
take
the other trap too
yeah,
that's really pernicious is like people in software development courses wanting to make text adventures. And the reason that it's such a pernicious trap is because you almost immediately get into like it is so much easier to print hello world
right,
than it is to make a game out of rooms.
yeah,
Like I could coach someone through the process of making a game out of rooms now and stuff like that, but there are ideas that you don't learn right away around like how to manage state and how to manage a bunch of different things that like people that are learning their loops and their if conditions, maybe they get lucky and come up with the right ideas, maybe they don't.
yeah. But there's well, I
Where
guess
something like Bitsy would probably be a lot better introduction to a lot of that stuff.
right, because it lets you kind of like not only can you kind of use it everywhere, but you can also, use it everywhere. Say like on any kind of computer.
Mm-hmm.
But it does having graphics goes a long way to like understanding what something is. Having
Yeah.
like and there's like a million hacks like built into Bitsy as well. Like there's so many kind of like what's
Well,
what, like Bitsy and Bipsy and Borksy and
3D Bitsy.
Bitsy 3D and how many did you use any like Bitsy kind of adjacent things as well?
I used the Bitsy hacks, I think, to
Okay.
make Universal Studios, but I haven't really played with any other tools though.
Yeah, because there's like, people like Bitsy a lot, so they've kind of found, and it's because it is a very, I guess, non-commercial thing. Like, there's not like the Bitsy to Steam Next Fest pipeline or whatever. The Bitsy to Game Pass pipeline does not exist. It creates a different culture around that engine of like the kind of games that are made in it, of a kind of make and share kind of sort of thing. So you have a lot of people like, oh, I wanted to make my Bitsy game in 3D, and I figured it out, and then I passed it on to other people.
Yeah.
Do
Well, it's also like the other thing about Bitsy too is, from what I can tell, it's not built like Bitsy is not built like a modern web developer would build Bitsy.
yeah,
Speaking as somebody that's my day job is like, you know, modern front end client software development. And like I look at Bitsy and I'm like, they didn't build it this way. And that's not a knock against Bitsy by any means, because modern web development has a lot of very specific constraints and pressures on it and stuff like that. And
right.
like I kind of dig you know, just write it in relatively straightforward JavaScript, as I understand. When I say I'm not straightforward, but like relatively unadorned, we'll say.
Yeah, and I think that's
JavaScript.
like a crucial part of that because it's like, hey, it allows you to not have to have a lot of experience going into it in the same way that
Yep.
like I think the barrier between I'm making something and or I want to make something and I'm making something, whether the thing you make is good or not, like
Mm-hmm.
the barrier between you acquiring paint and putting paint on a canvas, there basically is no barrier there. So
Yeah.
it's same with like most mediums with like film and music, and there's like no barrier to making something, whether the thing is the worst thing you've ever seen in your life or not. Is mostly irrelevant. You can make it, and like sometimes there's like that difficulty of like you need to learn programming or something, or like you need to figure out
Well, I
all
mean,
these things.
I would argue that every medium has things that you realistically, if you want to,
Yeah.
because there's not a lot of barrier between like grabbing watercolors, or crayons, or I mean acrylics can be a little bit expensive, but
Sure. Yes. There's
there,
a financial barrier to all this stuff, obviously.
yeah, and sitting down and doing a thing. But like most people, when they want to artistically express something, they have a goal.
Yeah.
Even the people that make like steam shovelware have a goal. And I think so there's a YouTuber called CJ the X, and they had this video on like the 7 deadly art sins. And one of the things they said was that like sincerity is not the result of a lack of effort. It's a process that you get to by figuring out how to say what you want to say or how to build the thing. And like not everything, and of course not every medium, not every expression in a given medium has to be some grand statement or whatever, but like
Yeah.
building, so all that to say that like yeah, you can pick up something and express something in Bitsy relatively easy. Cool. Um but like that's still but for music you still need to practice your scales
Yeah.
or practice imitating other music or what have you. You still practice is still a very valid part of learning how to express yourself in these different mediums because
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was simply saying that it's nice to have a thing that when
Hmm.
it's easy to like start something and hit run and have something that feels like a playable game, whether you're good at it or not. It feels like which is like the benefit of a lot of engines that have like drag and drop tools or block based programming and that kind of thing. Things that require you to like not have to have like a whole tutorial before you could just like jam on something,
Yeah.
which is
Well, you know what else I think about? The other thing that's neat about Bitsy, thinking about it at least, I haven't played with it quite a ton because most of my ideas are bigger than what Bitsy usually has,
right.
which is funny. Anywho, I think Bitsy is also like a demake of RPG Maker.
Oh, like a almost conceptually
Like
in a
not
way.
not
Right.
explicitly, not explicitly, but because it has a very built-in default set of things, it gives you a good like, hey, if you're gonna build a thing in Bitsy, it's gonna be a thing about walking around and seeing story text pop up.
Yeah.
So your job isn't come up with how to walk around and make story text pop up. It's focusing on the art and the story text.
Right, and then
And
figuring out like if you want to hack it or develop kind of like more
mhm,
complicated like game states later, but like it takes
yeah.
care of. That's why I started in when I first started game development. I was using an adventure game studio because it
Hmm,
was what I wanted to do, and it does all the work for you that you want to do. Like
yeah.
people walk
It's
around and they interact with objects and they have inventory systems
neat.
and it
Yeah.
and it
I sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I started I think I so I had like 3 starts.
Yeah.
First one was in QBasic, doing little hand menu text adventure stuff and predictably tripping over a lot of the things that happened there back when I was like a early teens. The second was in this cursed VB4 clone called Envelop Basic, where I like built Space Invaders where they had radio buttons as the shots and used timers to tick the game logic, and that was a whole thing. Um, got a little inspired by like seeing WarioWare DIY and not being able to make anything with it because I didn't own it. Because my parents didn't really believe in giving us handheld consoles at the time.
Sure. what could you get? You get up with all sorts of stuff. You can't take away a handheld console because you can hide it. Ooh. And
Yeah.
gaming on the go. On who
Well,
could
it
conceive
was
of it?
also
Yeah.
just not. Well, there's also 5 of us, and like
Oh
sharing
yes.
one handheld console between 5 kids is always going to be a little tricky if you only have the one.
Right, right, and especially because it's not like it's much more of a private experience than like a TV centered console, where
Yep.
even like technically speaking, it can be a group activity, even if it's like single player
The,
games.
the thing I will say is that so like my mom didn't really end up buying us kids video games very often, but my dad did, and my dad actually had decent taste in games. So I mostly dodged the like weird, incomprehensible, strange games that were put out for people that don't know what games are.
Right, right.
Not that I didn't experience them at all, but like mostly it didn't happen. um, and then so going back to like where we got started, then I made like a Space Invaders clone in Pygame in college, and then I really got started in Ludum Dare 34. I want to say with Love 2D, and that was the engine that I used for like the next 5 or 6 game jams I was in. It's actually so
Yeah,
funny. A little bit of
I
trivia.
weirdly just played a lot of games in Love 2D after having not seen it for a little while.
Yeah, it's Love 2D is an interesting engine all told. Not because it's like does anything crazy, but because it is what I would give a software developer that wants to learn game development.
Sure.
Because I would give a completely random new person Bitsy, but for somebody that already knows how to program, I would probably give them Love 2D if they're not already set on doing 3D stuff. Because it lets you kind of work at that lower level and build your own structure a bit and then trip over getting that wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is, in my opinion, valid experience. Yeah. And then later I picked up, the funny trivia bit. So in Ludum Dare 34, in the overall ratings category, me and like I don't know, the Mrs. YouTuber. I don't know the correct number of
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
words.
Yes.
We are right next to each other in the overall ratings. And I would go on to like only do this as a hobby, and he would go on to make it his job.
Right. Yeah, no, I have not the worst, but not the best ranking on some Ludum Dare game forever ago.
Yeah.
And that was me also being like not good at it, but it, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Takes time to make games. 34 is not that long ago.
34 is like 5-6 years ago now.
Okay, maybe it is. I'm just seeing familiar names when I was looking through this itch playlist of.
I'm sure.
34, and I was like, oh, people are at this for a long time. And that's part of what I'm trying to focus on is like so that people don't have to do it like forever and for nothing is the hope. Maybe who knows?
Like try to make it bring some visibility to folks that aren't at the absolute top of whatever game jam they're in.
Right. There's like so much. There are a lot of people make a lot of video games all the time. They never stop making video games.
Yeah.
I'm looking for more space, I guess, to find video games.
So, are you looking? So, 2 questions I definitely want to ask.
Yeah.
One to you and one to is not to you.
Yes.
Are you looking to be like a video games tastemaker? Are you looking to like sift through games and pick out ones that you find interesting and promote certain ideas? Or are you looking more to just like let's find whoever and try to build a bit of a scene out of stuff that catches your fancy, I guess. Like, is there? I guess that what I'm ultimately asking is, what is the Indiepocalypse agenda?
I well, I've used alternative a lot more. I think because my ideal space is something that feels more foreign to what you would think of when you think of what a video game is. I want to
Okay.
like and it's like I am a beggar, of course, not a chooser typically with submissions, and
Mm-hmm.
I tend to trend towards things that do not feel like they are video games in the very usual sense, because
Gotcha.
there are plenty of those. There's plenty of people who like that is what the main focus is. That is what like itch.io focuses on primarily. Like if you go to like their front page and the games that they feature video games. They feature characters walking around, little guys walking around spaces, completing objectives. Getting points, that kind of thing. Uh,
Gotcha.
like even if you look,
So,
yeah.
what about eyes got past that filter then?
Uh, I
Because
do,
eyes is very definitely
yeah.
a guy walking around a space completing objectives.
I do sometimes. I mean, sometimes it is a matter of volume of submissions. I'm
Fair
not gonna
enough.
get 9 real out there wild
Like
kind of.
9 Yume or whatever.
Yes. You're right. I'm sure that there are 9 people making Yume inspired games every month, but uh, and I for whatever the goals of Indiepocalypse are, I am not um, a full on video game snob of I do not play games that are little guys collecting points. I've played
Mm-hmm.
plenty of games that involve. After this, I'm probably gonna play Final Fantasy VII some. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
I like video games, but like and I tend to include. So I will, even with a wide selection, I want to have a variety as well, and not feel like you're kind of getting 9 of the 10 of the same thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So I will usually involve like a game that is like, oh, this is more like you would a video game, but has
Mm-hmm.
like a flavor, a vibe that I like, even if it is like, you know, more.
Relatively, even if it's kind of by the numbers in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yes, but if it's not strictly, it has to kind of still feel like it has its own identity, even if it is more familiar. Because there are a
I
lot
definitely,
of games that are
I
like,
definitely think eyes has an identity.
yes. Well, trust me when I tell you, it would not be there if it didn't. If it felt like a very generic,
Yeah,
like somebody just knows video games and they made a video game that looks like what they think video games look like.
right. The Chat GPT output of video games.
Yes. I play a lot of those in my curation process. Not literally using AI, but they functionally feels like they might as well be machine learned video games.
Yeah, and then, if I might,
Yes.
is now.
Yeah.
How did you get started?
So I've been making games kind of in my free time for the better part of a decade, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had my own kind of just like my own little team called Virtually Competent that we shipped a couple things. And then I did IT work mostly up until the pandemic hit, basically. And I finally started looking for like games industry jobs, and I worked at Phenomena for about 5 months before
Yes.
they shut down.
I would it surprise you to know that I submitted an application for a producer job about, let's say, a week before that video came out.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I,
Yeah,
I
that's rough.
I have since learned, though, apparently, reliably shipping a monthly anthology of games and collaborating with game developers does not actually make you qualified to be a video game producer, though, apparently.
I mean,
So I've been
as
told.
I mean, I think I get it though. I get
Yeah.
why it wouldn't.
Yes.
Well, the only reason I say that is because my last
official experience.
Yeah. Well, but like my last year of game development, or like the last half of 2022, like I'm technically the lead programmer, but I also end up effectively acting like the producer,
Right.
as I understand the role in a lot of games, just because, like I talked about before, I kind of have just enough knowledge. Like to give some examples, if I have just enough knowledge to do things like for eyes, um, the sound effects came in relatively late in the process,
Yeah.
and um, one of them was a jump sound effect that sounded a little bit like a Mario jump.
Yeah.
And in the back of my head, I'm going, no, 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 this does not fit. because Eyes as a game isn't meant to feel gamey.
Yes. Yeah.
Or maybe it's not meant to feel arcadey. It's meant to feel like kind of a space that you're working through um, rather than a set of levels.
Right.
Anyway,
And that is me saying that is mostly me making a joke about how video games never get released on schedule.
oh,
And people are disorganized, and
true.
and I listen. I do not regret for a moment that I work in an office that has nothing to do with video games. It's a true blessing that I don't have to like.
Yeah.
don't have to worry about your future as much.
You're right.
I definitely like I worked at a university hospital like doing support for researchers.
Yeah.
And I could have been there for life if I wanted to.
Right.
Like I had good health insurance, I had everything, all the comfort that I needed.
Yes.
And it was a big scary risk to go to Phenomena.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I I guess it was kind of strange because it was like I've been following this industry long enough to kind of know that layoffs happen and
Yes.
people are supportive,
Constantly.
right? Yeah, it's not an uncommon thing. I also
Right.
thought that Phenomena had been around for about a decade prior, and I thought that they were enough of like a known, proven quantity that they would continue to be around for a long time. But I just kind of ended up getting my whole like indie dev bingo card filled out right away,
Right. Right.
and kind of speeding that process. But yeah, and then I ended up at kind of using that leverage of like, hey, Phenomena is known for hiring some really amazing talent, and everyone there is like really well respected. I kind of like used that to my advantage and went to Twitter and like, hey, like, please help me and these other people get jobs. And there were only like 40 or so people at that company. I think it wasn't like a huge company, like a Activision Blizzard
Right.
style company shutting down.
If it's one of those things where like it's an indie studio, but they're always bigger than you think they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So I kind of used whatever I could to kind of like boost myself and other people, and I ended up at No Goblin and kind of got that job because of that jumping off point of being like, hey, I can put this on Twitter and people will boost it,
Yeah.
and someone will find me. And I found exactly the right opportunity for me. So I've been at No Goblin for closing in on a year, I think now, and I could be happier.
Yeah,
Nice.
they themselves have been around for quite a while too.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
right, over 10 years as well. If
yep,
at least a Twitter
that's
account.
right. I think it's very close. It's like next year, I think next year is the 10-year anniversary for Roundabout,
Yeah,
their first game. But yeah,
but that itself
This
is like they've been around for like even like and you I mean you yourself have been around. I remember I have a massive playlist of games on itch like that is like
yeah,
it's just called
I've noticed.
Is right. um, and actually, virtually competent games are sitting. A couple of them are sitting down there towards the beginning of that list,
oh wow,
which
that's
is like
that's wild.
right because what do they come out like? What is this?
Oh, I
Yeah, 2014.
yeah, that sounds right.
For some of these games, and that is like, it's also one of those things where like putting together like who are, uh, you know, these people, and like I'm like, oh, this is that person, and
Yeah.
I think you had I also filed people away and like, oh, this person works at the company. What would they want to do with me? People, but it's always nice. It's like, oh yeah, I get caught sometimes in this mentality of like, oh, you got like some money once. You got money once from something. Clearly, you'll never want money again.
Yeah.
And like I'll file people aside and be like, no, why would they want everything, as if independent work is not actually just like a billion small like little grants and submission acceptance fees or whatever,
Yeah.
royalties everywhere. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the thing I really enjoy my time at No Goblin, and I enjoy the people I work with, and like the project that we're working on, which has not been announced yet.
yes, the NDAs of video games.
Yeah, like that's stuff, but then also like I like having that freedom, and I'm really thankful to work at a place where it's like when I started Phenomena, in the contract it's like, oh, we own everything that you make while you
Yes,
work for us.
I have come across some people who
Yeah.
let's just say there were some synonyms within Indiepocalypse.
Yeah. And I am really fortunate to work at a place now where that is not the case for No Goblin. And they still support me for putting new stuff out. And like my bosses will retweet like Universal Studios theme parks or whatever, right? And yeah.
That frankly seems like there's no way that could be legal, but somehow it
Yeah.
is.
Oh yeah, it's just it's terrible. But yeah, I enjoy the stuff that I do for No Goblin, but also like there's a limit to the kind of things that we can accomplish
Right.
in that kind of space, like shipping like a game that I'm learning so much about what kind of, I guess, production even, right? Like not even being like a production role. Like, okay, we have to think about like localization, like what do we do to like make a game available in like a bunch of different languages?
Yes.
All the different systems in Unreal to like help us like ship to different consoles and optimizing for things, like kind of like the stuff you were talking about before about Unreal settings, right? It's like those are things I need to worry about now, instead of being like, oh, I can just ship things with defaults and be fine with it because I don't really care who's playing it.
I occasionally have people message me. I assume these people message like to go around itch and message a lot of people, would be like, I love your work. How would you like me to translate it into X language? And I'm like,
yeah,
buddy, you don't know what you're getting into.
yeah. It's just
assuming I have
it's a lot.
There are some just like some issues just have visual novels that are like 10, 30, 100K words.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine. And that's the kind of stuff that it's like at a company where we're trying to ship these things for like as quote unquote like real games that go in like Steam and on consoles and like whatever. There's a lot of red tape to go through, and it's a long process. And I really enjoy just like going and doing a game jam in a weekend and making something that is just my own. And still like doing stuff with like I like working with people. I like not having to cut through all the red tape of a big production. And that is why I enjoy like, Indiepocalypse and meeting people through communities like this, right? Is because that's, I'm not just like totally content. I'm very content with my job.
Right.
But I also like, I want to do a lot of different stuff, and I can only do so much for a paycheck, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I can imagine like any project that has to go through all of the red tape and it is that big, ultimately you can only do, I mean, imagine it takes 2 years to pull a game together, which is not necessarily that big of a game. You can do 5 of those in a decade.
Yeah, it's right. It's a thing of like there was a great Waypoint, rest in peace Waypoint.
There were what now 2 video game websites left or something.
Yeah, not very many. There's a great Waypoint interview, I think, with I'm not gonna remember his name now, but he worked on Jake Solomon, I think. He worked on Marvel Midnight Suns.
That sounds like the name of a person who works on video games.
And he also worked in the XCOM games. And something that he said in that interview, he said something about like, I think about like how old I was when I worked in XCOM, and then how old I am working on Marvel, this Marvel thing, and the gap between those two things, and like it's years of time for those two projects, and like, oh, I didn't have kids when I finished XCOM, or I have kids now that I'm launching this Marvel game,
Yes.
and he thinks about like, oh, like I'm always thinking about like I have how many games do I have left, right? Like how many games do I have left to ship in my life? And like what kind of legacy am I going to leave behind? And every time I make one, every time I'm like leading a project like Marvel Midnight Suns, I am taking a risk and saying like this is something I believe in, this is something I want to ship. And if it's a bust, right, that could be the end of your career. Like you might just not get work after that. So it's like a really hard thing to balance of like if you want to ship a game in that space, and I don't want to ship stuff like that. I want to ship stuff at that kind of scope and scale with a huge team. I want to be like, No Goblin is like eight, 9 people.
Yeah.
We're like a good size. I like everybody on my team. I'm pretty happy with it. And I hope that we can keep working together indefinitely and making, things at like a medium scale where we're kind of like, making things that are a decent size, 10-hour experience or whatever that you're going to be done with and be happy about rather than like a big AAA blockbuster. But I'm also going to keep making stuff in my free time too. That's just like weird, weird garbage like the Unreal on Universal Studios.
That you make it in like a weekend. It's nice.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
That's why I like that if you go on Wikipedia and you start looking at indie bands, you'll see they have like 30 associated acts because within these spaces,
Yeah.
like people are constantly like working together and like teaming up and pairing off, and like there's not the strict dedication of we're a game studio, we all work here for 10 years, 20 years, 30
Yeah,
years.
right.
I mean, yeah, interesting.
It's
Because
it's a thing I think about with like film a lot. How like
Hmm.
there are film studios, but there's not like I'm an editor at Universal, so I just edit all of the Universal movies.
yeah,
I think
I was
there's probably house editors.
yeah. I mean, speaking of like game studios running through their lifespan, like what happened with Zachtronics, where they like made one last game
Yeah.
and then just kind of they're like, okay, band's breaking up now. We're going and doing our own things.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's lovely. I think that like when you have done the stuff that you want to do, and they have an amazing catalog, right? Like
Oh yeah,
it's really great to just be like, okay, like it's a similar thing with like movies and TV shows and other media, right? Where it's like if I can watch a thing and they go for like 4 seasons and then they call it, like that's the end of the thing, that's wonderful. If it's
yeah,
like, oh, it's gonna go until we get canceled, at some point the quality is gonna drop, right? It's they're not doing it for the story anymore, you
I
know?
mean, yes, 95% of the time.
Yes.
There are some serialized storylines that do manage to actually, like, I think the most impressive feat I've seen in that space is Schlock Mercenary,
uh,
because it's a serialized webcomic that went from 2000 to 2020 and
Wow.
only ever really got better, released daily, and also told multiple long, larger storylines. So apologies to anyone who's hearing about this for the first time and you're like now going and checking it out and like realize that you have 20 years of daily comics to catch up on.
yeah.
Just
No,
warning.
that is the. I'm honestly surprised it ever ended. In my mind, those are one of those things that just kind of last forever.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad it did though, in
Yeah,
a way,
5
because
Hugo
like,
Award nominations.
and never once actually getting it. I don't think.
No, that's why they're all noms. Always a
Yeah,
nom, never a winner. But that's still like,
in a way, I'm kind of glad that it is ending,
yeah,
mostly, or that it is ended, mostly because unfortunately the creator got COVID and then long COVID.
right,
So like not having the pressure of having to do something daily and being able to kind of strike out and getting that like, oh, the series has ended, now you can buy your books or what have you, and actually be able to complete a collection. I think there's And it's also nice to have closure on something that long.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that
Anywho,
is the
sorry.
you don't wind up in Berserk Land or whatever, where you never have actual closure on something somebody worked on for a large portion of their life.
Yeah. Although the funny thing is like Schlock Mercenary probably could have, like, I could see it storyline wise. It could have gotten stretched out longer,
Right.
and also storyline wise, it probably could have ended earlier because the nature of the story being built out of like these arcs that happened over time, most of those arcs could have ended as you could have added like, I don't know, a month's worth of comics and tied up a bow on things.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much. I think you can find like some of my favorite stuff, or some of the most interesting stuff log form is like if the secret I found from watching kind of longer things is they're very good at mining their own history more than they are like I don't know planning things out. Like if it's like
But
if
Schlock Mercenary doesn't do that.
oh yeah
It doesn't. It continuously, the plot is moving forward and coming up with new things. The thing about Schlock Mercenary that I think makes it work, and it's not an easy thing to pull off by any
yeah
means, but almost every strip has a punchline,
sure
so
right
you can start just about anywhere. And the larger storylines only really get you invested after you've decided to invest some time into it. But it's also like it's like this sci-fi space opera thing. So there's a bunch of basically, because it's serialized and because it's this big giant sci-fi thing, you can make a story by going, well, what if this weird thing happened? And how does that interplay with whatever else we've got going on?
yeah
And so it didn't actually end up like it definitely used elements of like the lore and stuff. And I don't know exactly how internally consistent it is. It's not something
sure
I've studied. But it also is like, hey, all you need for a story is a way to get the mercenary group on another assignment
yeah
and then follow that through and then play out the implications on the greater universe. And I say that like it's easy, and of course it isn't.
right but that is you gotta hone your craft. You have to kind of dial in what you're good at and then kind of like find like what you want to make and then you know uh make it. It's which is
So
yes that very simple thing to do, of course.
yeah,
But that all said, it's like I think the best work comes out of people when it's clear, like you see what resonates with them, when you see like what their little ticks are and what their interests are, and they come through because it's like, oh yeah, this is why this person made this thing. It makes a lot of. How did I play that? This kind of like you see how it shows off and like what it highlights a person's work, and then what makes it more long standing. Anyway, that was
yeah.
a weird kind of half thought that I had, but anyway, this show has been running for a while. We're cresting. We're getting towards our way towards the uh, um, the 2 hours, which is too long to run this show. This is I try to keep it reasonable length, a nice listenable length, because I assume there's like 30 people who, if my analytics are to be believed, who listen to
Pay
this show.
attention.
Yeah, but
I
it's
might have added a 31st with my
perfect.
other team member for at least this episode.
Yeah,
Who knows?
I to me this is like as someone who is not going to travel the world to go to game
Mm,
conventions ever, probably because they are expensive.
yep.
This is
Yep.
my way of creating that kind of post-con hangout, because like both selfishly that I create it for myself, but also like for people around the world who are not going to like it costs a lot of money to travel to the U.S., especially to
Yeah,
an expensive city within the U.S. as well. And then
and to stay at a hotel and
they have to, yeah, they
all
have to
that
pay
good
money to
stuff.
stay there and to eat there. Seems like a scam to me. And then
Yeah,
it costs money to like go to events. That's so much like money. How do you get that stuff? I'm still trying to figure that
yeah.
out.
So, do you like have any game development plans in your future then?
I mean, at some point, probably, maybe. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying you have to. I
yeah,
just as a curiosity point, because like I don't know. For me, uh, I have some like one of the things about Eyes
yeah,
was that it felt like kind of hitting one of my white whales
yeah,
as a game dev because I built an atmospheric Metroidvania that people didn't reliably get lost in,
yeah.
like me and the team, of course.
Right, right.
Um, and that felt like kind of a white whale. So like I have other like game ideas that I want to try to pull off at some point, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I would say, broadly speaking, I created Indiepocalypse so that I could make money making the kind of games that I want to make. So I'm kind of brute forcing this culture into existence that I want, so
Mm.
that I can then make my 20, 30, dare I say, hour long game,
Mhm.
and that people will pay $5 for. And so, but I don't think that'll. I don't think I'm going to Dice or GDC to tell Microsoft to put those games on Game Pass. I think I'm going to Zine
Right.
Fest. I think I'm going to like different art markets. I think I'm going to you know, like comic events that have game spaces within them, um, which are
You'll
typically way cheaper because you can find them in like far more expensive parts of the U.S. often. Uh, Independent comic creators and zinesters, not the I'm not to paint them with a broad brush, but they're not the wealthiest. They're not the 1%. Uh,
I mean,
so
most of
those events, by nature of their existence, tend to be cheaper to attend, because usually companies are not flying you out there on their dime to pay for those things. They're not like
yeah.
corporate events, like most game. I mean, most even like PAX to some extent is like corporate adjacent. There's very few like
I mean,
not
it's only
non-budgeted independent creators.
it's only the most popular conference run by like the most gamer of the webcomics.
Yes, yeah, it's a
It's not like it's you know full of people or anything.
yeah, it's a whole like and the independent space is much smaller, but hopefully kind of picking up a little for games for like the very indie space.
I
As
mean, it'd
someone
be cool.
as
It'd
someone who
be in what? Sorry.
I was gonna say, as someone who has like a yearly indie comic show very close to me, there is like it's nice to see, and there are multiples. There's one happening this very weekend, they're intensely like focused on indie works, and they are like they're a lot cheaper. As someone who has attended TCAF in the past, it's not very expensive to attend. Like I don't know what a comic tabling cost is like, but a game developer tabling cost very cheap, like
Gotcha.
very cheap.
It to kind of go back to the regional stuff too. It'd be interesting if by building up kind of the indie game scene, you could have like an indie apocalypse regional edition.
The very first one is all Massachusetts devs. As someone
Mm,
from Massachusetts, uh,
fair enough.
and I had a dream. I had a dream of a long term dream of beating Sufjan Stevens to the punch and making an indie apocalypse for all 50 states. But like speaking of, is he speaking of like how many games are in my life. If I did those once a year, that would be 50 years of my life.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was like, if I did that, I would have to like really crank them out, like fast. But that's the whole like. Speaking of years of our life, I tried to end this show and it was unsuccessful.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that is as long running on Indiepocalypse as anything else is me very unsuccessfully ending the show. Because I like to talk to people in this very specific. I don't like to talk to people publicly online. But put me in a virtual room with people, and I love to chat. I love to hang out.
Yeah.
I just like I've just never been good socially at that kind of very specific kind of. Anyone else can like peek in and on our conversation and add something in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just never worked well with me. And also, there's a whole listen. We don't need to get into this. This is a whole other thing of my own personal baggage, I suppose. But
Might I ask one last question, then?
yeah, go ahead.
Izzy, do you have any White Whale games,
Well,
or is that all behind NDAs?
I would say that nothing I'm working. The thing that I'm working on right now, I'm very excited about. I'm very happy to be part of. There is a game that I've had in mind for the better part of a decade. That is like the thing that I would like to really make, and I'm hoping that maybe No Goblin or the connections I make through No Goblin will allow me to make that at some point. But can't say too much more than that.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
I have there are all sorts of I have a mountain of games I would like the thing post pre Indiepocalypse that caused me to start Indiepocalypse is that I wanted to make a game of professional wrestling.
Nice.
That
Nice.
but I did not want to make it long. And I was like, this sucks. I don't want to make this thing 8 hours long. It just doesn't work. And
Well, you know what you could do,
create a
theoretically speaking.
create a zine.
You could.
Create a culture around games.
Yeah, true.
Create a culture around games so strong that it supports other people making their own zines and then submit it to that.
Theoretically speaking, I was going to say you could make the Yomi Hustle of professional wrestling games.
Yeah, no, I had a different idea in mind, which it was. I love the carnival theater of it. It's a beautiful, weird thing. As someone who actually does not care much about professional wrestling.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
we'll get
professional wrestling.
Never mind.
Yeah, we're getting trapped.
We're not going to sit around and talk about professional wrestling and how the cream of the crop. Who here is not the cream of the crop or whatever.
I mean, I was just going to say that I am not a fan of professional wrestling. I am a fan of fans of professional wrestling that like say cool things about it.
Yes, it's a weird, beautiful little subculture that exists. But anyway, shut it down. I can see my rec timer approaching 2 hours.
Okay.
So thank you both for being here. But this is
Thank you.
This is a podcast after all, and all podcasts must end in the same way that we're all familiar with, and that's like, I gotta know you, Mike. Is where can I find your stuff if I want to look for it? If I was not me,
okay.
If I was a stranger.
You can find the games that I build. Almost all of them end up on yamicus.itch.io. Sometimes I post thoughts on a related co-host account that is just Umicus backwards without the Y.
And that is spelled UMAK or UMAIKAS.
Yep. I will say, just because a game is something I have made doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good.
No,
that's a story for another time. But
art, baby.
Yeah.
Izzy, where could one find your variety of things?
Yeah, so you can find me on most things, Twitter, co-host, etc. Itch at is not IZNAUT.
Yes.
You can also just go to isnot.com, and that's like my portfolio where I've got
Beautiful.
all my junk on it. So
Love,
yeah,
love to see someone just get their own website. Nothing,
yeah, definitely.
nothing better than it. You can do all sorts of stuff on your own website. Did you know that?
Yeah, it's my own little playground.
Yeah, you can put little
This is
gifs
my
on there.
house. Yeah.
I have, I, I got cursed by making my little tape spinning GIF, and I was like, this is a beautiful, this is a cursed area of web design that I could travel down, and I'm gonna try to avoid not going too far down that road. But you can. It turns out it's very easy to make GIFs out of real life objects, which is another dangerous skill to have. And even
Yeah.
without a green screen, even I made this.
Hmm.
But yeah, FMV. And it's a. Speaking of that, speaking of weird synchronicity, and like the strangest of synchronicity is that when you were talking about professional wrestling, I was thinking about, of course, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, and Captain Lil Bono, and the Roddy Piper VHS, which was the one that I owned as a child. And on Twitter here is a nice little thing of Elvira and Luigi from said Super Show. Anyway, the universe is a strange series of coincidences. Why there were probably not enough professional wrestlers in the Super Mario Brothers movie that just came out. Not enough sweatiness or something. I think it's very funny to see people. I knew it would happen, but I love to see people recontextualizing that original movie.
Yeah.
Because it rules. And that
It does rule.
In the way that's kind of weird and bad. But where else can you get Dennis Hopper as the man King Koopa? But speaking of King Koopa, no. Speaking of, why did I type King Koopa?
Speaking of castles where the princess finally ends up,
speaking of Dennis,
we have the end of the show, perhaps?
Yes, exactly. Speaking of Dennis Hopper and his love of Pabst Blue Ribbon, no, I have nothing. I have nothing. Buy Indiepocalypse. I think it's good. If you buy issue 39, the people here occasionally get money.
Yay.
Yay.
This is one of the rare cases where they got paid twice in a month. That does not come up very often. Usually there's a real big surge in that first week, and then sales drop off. But then occasionally they'll trickle through, and they'll get like the third or fourth week will have another little kickback. But sometimes people will email me, but they're like, I think shouldn't we get a payout every week? And I'm like, buddy, you and me both. I wish I had that payout every week too. But game developers, they should get royalties from things, you know? I'm thinking. Seems
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, I definitely, I wish that was a more common practice.
It seems like I like the idea of like, I was an actor on a show. I get 30 cents in the mail or whatever. But 30 cents is something. It's like, I don't know. I think it's nice to get paid for your work, if so long as someone else continues to make money off of it. Anyway, buy Indiepocalypse, indiepocalypse.com. You can now buy all of the issues from my own website digitally or on a USB inside of a neat little cassette case. I cracked out my old label printer, so I'm all ready to go. I have a label printer and a scale. I'm my own. I listen to the podcast call, and I do not going to the. I do hate going to the post office. I do print my postage at home, as any true podcaster would. I was looking at a Casper pillow less than 3 hours ago, and thinking, should I buy this? And I decided, no, it was too expensive.
I will say that I got my cassette tape in the mail today, and it
Ooh,
was packaged beautifully, and it is in beautiful condition. So I
thank
highly recommend.
thank you. I was wondering because the cases I got, or not the cases, the packaging I got are like made for cassette cases, but there's like no room for bubble wrap, so I got nervous. Like
Yeah,
the one time I tried to put bubble wrap on it, it felt like I was gonna break it by putting bubble wrap on it because it would be packed so tight. But here we
yeah,
are.
just a strong cardboard shape. I think it
Yes,
holds up nicely.
I wrote fragile all over it. Uh, but there we go. Testimonials. They're cool
Yep.
things. I have I have all 41 of them sitting, but mere feet away from me, uh, ready for a market in Providence in 2 weeks. So 3 weeks. So in 3 weeks, if you're in Providence, Rhode Island, uh, check out the Indiepocalypse table. I will have a bunch of cassettes for you to buy. But if you're not, go to indiepocalypse.com/tapes and get physical versions of video games so that you may one day buy your kids a version of buy your kids Indiepocalypse and be like when they ask for I wanted buy me the new Mario game, be like here is Indiepocalypse and they'll be like I don't get this game. What's this bitsy game with Woody Woodpecker in it? Um, I, I do love that idea of some child receiving this game and it like searing into their brain in the same way it's seared into your brain, Izzy, and
The legacy continues.
right of this kind of whatever like decades from Bitsy successor exists.
Woody Woodpecker is not the god we wanted, but it's the god we deserved.
Yes, and there somehow like they've gone through this and they have voice clips from you as well, and because you become this kind of like entity within it as well of like this person whose diary was passed on to me, and I love art and I love supporting it and people kind of doing their own thing with it. But that's it. You can subscribe to Patreon. It's a subscription service where you go and you get Indiepocalypse. You don't have to think about it. Of all, it's as far as those subscription services that charge you every month that you don't think about and always forget about. Indiepocalypse, it's a good one of those. You know that
Until
money.
you, after a year, look at it and you've suddenly got 120 new games.
Yeah, exactly. And 10 of them are brand new, made just for
Mm-hmm.
Indiepocalypse. The other 110 of them are probably new to you because they're like in this very niche indie space that is not like not widely recognized though. Damn, it should. That's the point of this thing is that I think it should. It should
Agreed.
stand shoulder to shoulder. A lot of these games do stand plenty shoulder to shoulder with like whatever game of the year things. I remember. I'm gonna end this show, but I always remember how like when I was seeing that like I played like Shadow of Mordor at some point uh,
Mm-hmm.
after it had come out, and I remember being like, "This is truly a game of the year out of obligation to giving game of the year to AAA games." Why would somebody want to play this game? Uh, apologies to Ubisoft and all the whatever. Who made that game? Oh, WB. Sorry, WB. I could be confused because you had to climb up towers to look at map objectives. Um,
Yep.
anyway, video games. That's enough of them. Get out of here. Don't play video games. Go watch a movie. Go read a book. Go, as they say, experience grass.
As the Rest in Peace Waypoint once said, "Fuck capitalism, go home."
Yes, right. Precisely.
Indeed.
Yes, RIP2. Are there are no more video game sites left. It's very. I've been thinking about that a lot for like this month. I like to put little things with my releases on co-host, and I've been thinking a lot about how my like contacts list of people I would like press contacts is now just like a graveyard of people being burnt out or laid off or or things that are shuttered. And like of the 200 of them, how many of those people are still working in games writing? And I stopped using that list less than like about a year ago, which is not a very long time. But it's a criticism is what gives art its long tail. It's what
Yeah, it really is.
it's what allows the things to surface, and it's why we have so many of the stuff we still have around today in other mediums, because critics are like, yeah, sure, that thing was the most highest grossing movie of that year, but I think this thing is more interesting.
Yeah. Well, a thing that's interesting in its time, or a thing that is interest in the now can be bought in a
Yes.
way that interest in the future is harder to buy.
Right. You could an ad campaign, advertising. It's a huge
Mhm.
industry for a reason. It works.
Yep.
If you spend a lot of money on something, but speaking of spending a lot of money, I'm spending a lot of money on. I spent too much money on pesto, and I'm going to eat that pesto after the show. Which is to say, I'm closing the show. We're shutting it down. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
You, Micus, Izzy, thank you both for being here. Thank you both for
Thank you.
being in
Thank
the
you.
zine, being in the game space. Glad it all exists.
Thank you for all the work you do. It's incredible.
Yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you. It's I don't know how to not do it anymore. It's just so ingrained into my existence. And
Well, thank you for pulling it together to begin with.
yeah, it's the benefit of being working fast and being hard to work with, or whatever. I don't think I'm hard to work with. I think I've mellowed out a lot more in the more recent years, but it's mostly that I just like am very nervous that if something doesn't get done, it'll never get done. So I have like if you let something idle too long, it'll simply never exist. So I have to think, oh God, this needs to get done yesterday so that it will exist. But anyway, there's more. If anything else, there's more. Something. I don't have a sign off. I don't have slogans. I'm just shutting this thing
I mean,
down.
you should just say that, maybe we should come up with one real quick.
Nope, never. I refuse to be marketable. I refuse to be. I refuse to have logos and
That's
slogans.
that's your slogan. I refuse to be marketable.
Indiepocalypse, the true home of the unmarketable. Can't pin me down. Never. I always say, pointing at my webcam turned off for emphasis. Anyway, goodbye.
Talking.
Goodbye.
Okay.